Live streaming is on.
Oh, apparently we're live. How is that possible? Oh, apparently we're live. All right, well then, seeing that we're live. Wait, I've got problems with my... Oh wait, I need to mute this, that's why. Okay. All right, so we are live. I'm just waiting for Kai. A bit early actually. It's only 10:02, so let me just let her know. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about Wortcunning, Herbalism, and just want to touch on a couple of other subjects as well. So anybody who's not aware, Wortcunning is an Anglo-Saxon term, and wort basically means any item or plant which is leafy. So it's a bit different to vegetables and stuff. And cunning refers to knowledge of something, so it's knowing of. So that's where the word Wortcunning comes from anyway. Just want to wait for Kai to get on, and then we can actually start discussing it properly. I'm just trying to figure out why I'm only seeing myself and not both of us. Sorry, this is the first live stream I've done, which is going through Jitsi with more than just myself. So bear with me. The topic will be very interesting once we get there. Oh, okay. Gonna have to get Kai back on again. All right, sorry about this. As I said, first time doing this. So, oh, there we go. Now I can see you. I can hear you.
Alrighty.
All right. So we haven't got anybody on yet, but yeah, we expect people. Sorry, this was a bit early. I connected Jitsi to go live, and then I thought I had to go live on YouTube, but apparently it connected straight away and went live.
Well, you're all set up at least.
Yeah, we're all set up. All right. So if anybody watching this afterwards, this is my great friend, Reverend Kai. And we met about 20 years ago. We were members of a coven. At the time, 20 years ago, quite a revolutionary coven, because it was spread across the world and online. So 20 years ago, you didn't have all this stuff we have now. So it was quite interesting to actually do.
We definitely didn't have video conferencing.
No.
I remember paying through the nose for our long distance phone calls and coordinating them with all of the time zones and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah, I think most of it was done over email and stuff, and I used to do it from work because for me to connect at home was a bit of a problem. All right, so I mentioned just now we're talking about Wortcunning today, and herbal magic, and that Wortcunning is actually an Anglo-Saxon term. Wort meaning a plant, a leafy plant, and cunning is basically referring to knowledge of, knowing of something. What I'd also like to touch on, if you don't mind, is the poison path. And also the Flying Ointment and the Witch's Sabbat, because they go a bit hand in hand. And I've been referring to the head rider and everything over the weeks. So I just want to touch on that a bit later. But as far as Wortcunning and herbal magic goes, there's actually one thing that I think a lot of people trip up on. 2 weeks ago, I spoke about one crafting, and I spoke about deadwood, greenwood, and livewood, and the dryads. And I think we can touch on it again here in terms of the actual spirits of the plants. So what would you actually say is pertinent to the topic? Actually about the actual spirits of the plants.
So I don't think you can be a successful herbal-based magic type person without having some interaction with plant spirits in some way. Of course, I'm an animist, and that's a basic animist philosophy instead of a mechanical philosophy. But, within those paradigms, within every culture that draws from indigenous wisdom, is an animist view that needs to work with the plant spirits. A lot of people do think that because we anthropomorphize our understanding of spirits in animistic magic, that you can only work with plant spirits if the plant is alive. And that's not my experience. You can absolutely work with plant spirits if you're only working with already processed plants. It's harder, it's a lot more work, but it is possible. And that's because we're connecting to collective spirits, souls. Now, if you want to work with individual plant spirits of this dandelion right here, the one in the southwest corner of my yard that gets lots of sun, that's the dandelion I want to talk to, then yes, it needs to be alive. But if you just want to work with dandelions, you can do that with a variety of actual material bodies.
Okay. And as far as harvesting actually goes, because as I said, I was speaking about one crafting, and when you actually cut the wood, you can either cut the green wood, which has the energy of the plant or the tree in it, or you can ask the dryad, the spirit of the tree, to actually go into that piece of wood before you actually cut it, which then makes it live wood.
If they want.
Yeah, if they want to. Would the same apply here? Because when you're harvesting herbs for magic or for herbal teas or something like that, would you actually request that the spirit of the plant actually go into that portion of the plant that you're taking?
It really depends on what you're doing. So wands are a great example. And the bigger category in Wortcunning is aldaruns, which are talismans made from plants that end up being an embodiment, a housing for that plant spirit. Generally, the line there is you don't consume those. They are an external thing. And in that case, you negotiate with the spirit first, usually over a fairly long period of time, about what you want to happen. And then you properly prepare a housing, which that part is very short because often the preparation happens while the plant is alive to the living plant. And then you make a contract that part of the spirit will continue to inhabit the aldarun so that you can have contact with the living plant spirit past the life of the plant. This is easier negotiated in short-lived plants, annuals and short perennials and things like that. And it's also understood that you're not completing the life cycle for that plant. So like wands, if you're working with a tree spirit in a particular tree and you want it to inhabit the wand so that you can continue to work with it in a physically distant location, you can still go back to that tree later and that plant spirit is still there. You're not separating it from the tree. And also, the spirit that comes to inhabit your aldarun is still the same spirit in the tree. They're not separated and therefore diverging in experience and understanding. It's just a home away from home. You're building it a vacation home to come back to your house and that sort of thing.
And the aldarun, I can never say it. That one. I always have a problem saying that word. That's usually a mandragora or sometimes datura, the actual root. Can you use any root? I mean, can you use ginger, for instance?
I've made ginger aldaruns. I make a lot of dandelion aldaruns. It's a plant of Saturn. It's very chthonic. It's wonderful for working with the dead and being a good escort on those kinds of transformative journeys. It's a very gentle introduction to the poison path, whereas mandragora is going to beat you over the head for a little while till you figure out what you're doing. Dandelion will hold your hand, and it's usually roots, but there are other ways to do it. Herbal stones come to mind. If you do not have a woody component to your particular plant, making an herbal stone is often a way to build an aldarun, and of course that takes quite some time and a large investment of physical material because you need to go through, oil and water and salt and put it all together so that you can actually produce a stone. And most
so you actually make a stone. You transfer the spirit into the stone.
Yes.
Okay.
Most people who do that are working over the course of a couple of years with a large stand of whatever plant it is in order to produce a stone, because you're going to have to process several pounds of plant matter to get, a little stone. But roots are very common because they're woody. They last past being removed from the plant, just like wood and inner bark is common. But, I've totally taken bundles of tobacco that have been fresh grown and packed with the Nicotiana flowers and the leaves, and then done all of the incantations and the work during the curing and smoking process. And then I end up with a worked bundle that looks kind of like a corn dolly that has become an aldarun and become an inhabited body.
Okay. Because traditionally it is meant to actually be carved into or representative of a human figure. But it doesn't need to be, does it?
Yeah, it needs to be.
Does it? Okay.
It doesn't need to be carved, but it does need to be transformed.
Okay.
That's why stones work, because you are involved in the transformation process. But just pulling up a root and drying it, or what I see people doing more often, buying a prepared dried root, that's not going to work. That's not going to transform. You're not going on a journey with the spirit. You're not binding part of your soul to its soul in order to complete the transformative process for both of you, which is like the point. That's the goal. Change in the self.
Okay, that brings me back to the harvesting. I'm thinking about generally, people will go to the supermarket to get cinnamon to do money magic, or they'll open a chamomile tea bag. Is there any worth in that? Is there any kind of element of power within that? I mean, it's mass produced. Is there?
You can absolutely still connect to the oversoul of the plant, and there is still sproul and latent energy within the dead body. It's still a doorway. It's still available. But it's not as easy as a live plant. It's not as many points of interaction as going through the harvesting process yourself. But I can't grow cinnamon here. I mean, I'm in, the middle of Turtle Island. I have below freezing winters. Cinnamon is not an option for a live plant for me, even with a greenhouse and everything else, because it's a tree. So if I want to work with cinnamon, that's my option, is procuring it one step away at the most from someone who grew it. But usually it's many more. So, is it ideal to go to the grocery and buy a tea bag? No. But is it still possible to do something with it? Yes, absolutely. It's just a lot more work. And you need to already be accomplished at connecting with plants, at being able to connect with those souls, at being able to tap into that power and walk through that door. You're not going to get it just from a tea bag if you don't know what you're doing. Which is why, most of the advice to beginning wortcunners is go sit in your yard and talk to whatever's there. And I don't mean go out to some foreign place that sounds romantic and perfect and magical. I mean the land that you dwell upon, the land that you sleep on. That's what you connect with, because that's the closest thing and the easiest possibility. And don't get hung up on, I need ash, or I have to have an elm tree, or I really got to have cinnamon. Trust me, there is an ally growing in the soil that your feet touch. You just have to find it.
Yeah, no, I agree. We were talking about this a while back, actually, because me living in South Africa, it's very difficult for me to actually find a lot of the trees and the herbs and stuff that, are spoken about. Blackthorn, impossible.
But you
ash.
have gum locust, right?
Yeah, sorry?
You have gum locust.
Gum? Locust. I think so. Yeah.
It's a short little tree with great big spiky things off of it. In the
spiky things over here.
It's an energetic cousin to blackthorn, so it makes people acting rods. But that's the thing. A lot of the lore that we're looking at is from things like the Witchcraft manuscript and Anglo-Saxon history and British history, and it's going to be plants that are on the British Isles, which doesn't mean they're worldwide.
Mm.
You know? And also, a lot of the plants that are in those are occurring at the times of a burgeoning spice trade. Black pepper is not native to Britain, but it's a big component in a lot of 14th and 15th century magic.
Mm.
Because the spice trade has brought black pepper to the Isles. And it's available. It's something you can put your hands on and do something with. And it's still got energy, even having traveled all of that distance and passed through all of those hands.
Mm.
And food, herbs that we think of are a really good place to start because you can actually get them in your body. You can experience a black peppercorn. You can put it on your tongue and feel it. You know, that gives you another way to interact with it.
Mm.
So I know you're talking about the poison path, but starting off with not particularly poisonous plants is usually an easier way. Although
No, I thought we'd get to the poison path a bit later. But yeah, so ideally, bottom line is, if you want to work with herbs in magic, if you can get the plant live, that is number one. If you can't get the plant live, then you can go to or order it online or go to the store. But it is better to connect with the land anyway. Especially when it comes to traditional witchcraft, it's just one of those things. You connect with the land you're on, and if you're in a different land to the one you were born in or where your ancestors come from, then it's still the land, and you actually connect to that land and pick up the energies from the trees and the plants and everything else. But it is, that's obviously going to be many, many, many years work. You could work with one plant for several years just to try and get its aspects and everything else. So in the meantime, while you're trying to learn all the natures of all the plants around you, at least you do have the option of at least working magic and getting the stuff online and connecting with it that way. So I think that's some, sorry.
Plants are plants. It's not about finding a specific plant. It's not about having basil or cinnamon or tobacco. It's about learning the language of plants so that you can talk to them. Once you talk to one plant, once you make one good friend, once you get an ally, the next ones will be easier.
Oh, okay.
So, yes, you can order things from the store. Yes, you can use dried plants and follow the spell ingredient lists and do the cooking. But that's not Wortcunning.
Mm.
That's just magic with plants in it.
Mm.
Wortcunning is knowing the plants. And to do that, you're going to have to start with land. Not a potted plant in your house either. That's a good interim step. Once you're comfortable and communing, you can bring someone inside and hang out with them in your own space if they're cool with that. But in order to open that door, in order to learn to have plant allies, in order to learn to commune with plant spirits, you have to start with somewhere where your feet can touch the earth.
Mm.
Because plants are not individuals. They are part of a huge network of fungus and nematodes and soil and everything else. If you pull a plant, its roots out of the soil, you are disconnecting it from half of its body, at least. So you've got to connect with some plant there on the ground you dwell within. And that doesn't mean you're not doing magic in the meantime. But without that connection, just ordering plants and putting dried herbs in jars and using them in spells and lighting candles on top of them and that sort of thing, that's not Wortcunning. That's just magic with plants in it.
Mm.
That makes sense.
Yeah. I know a question that some people are going to have. What about if you live in a big city?
Where do you go to work? Where do you spend your time? What is your commute? Where do your feet touch the ground? You do not live in a big city and never, ever, ever touch the earth. So
But
even
it's
if
not concrete or tar.
even if you're an apartment building and you live on the 50th floor, go out the front door of that apartment building. There's a plant somewhere nearby. Somewhere there's a plant. Talk to the tree that grows in the poor little sidewalk and whose roots have conquered the cement. You know, somewhere there's a plant.
Or the weed that's breaking through,
Yeah. So, and you're in communion with plants just by existing upon this planet. You're breathing in their spores, you're breathing in their pollen, you're breathing in the oxygen that they produce, you are giving them carbon dioxide, you're interacting with the plant kingdom, even when you're not aware of it. So there's always a point of connection.
Yeah.
And you can move further and further away into that concrete jungle once you know how it works. But I do not think that on your own, without a teacher, isolated, you're going to make those connections without a living plant and some earth.
But I mean, if you do live in a city and you can actually connect with one of the plants or one of the trees or even one of the weeds, as you said, once you're connected with one and it's easier with the others, then you can actually travel outside the city and start connecting with them easier. But it's that, I think, as you said, it's that initial connection that you actually need to try and make. Because you can't, I mean, if you live in a city, you can't keep on going outside the city into the country every single day. But I think that would be a place to start. Yeah.
You can go out into the country. There's nothing wrong with that, but you need to bring your magic home. You need to break the idea that nature is out there and I'm over here. You're part of nature. You're intimately connected with it, no matter where you are. And you may start, it may be easier to think of nature and plant spirits and that sort of thing out in the rural areas where there is not a city teeming with people and all of its concrete and buildings and everything else. That is perfectly fine if that's the doorway you need to start. But you can't keep it remote and at a distance effectively. It can't always be out there. You're going to have to find the allies that are close to you. And there are many cultures that have indigenous wisdom that say that the earth provides what we need. I mean, I find this very true. If there is suddenly a proliferation of some weed on my property in the spring, I know that that is the weed that is going to treat whatever ailment will be the big thing this winter. You know, some years I have poke go crazy. I'm like, oh, well, somebody's going to have cancer this winter. I will gather the poke and prepare it. Sure enough, somebody comes and talks to me and has cancer that winter. Lots of Bidens growing on my property in the spring. If it's in abundance, I harvest that abundance because I know that winter there's going to be lots of upper respiratory infections going around and I'm going to need it then. So the plants are, and the earth and the ecosystem that you are a part of, it's all connected. It's all together. And once you figure that out, once you can tap into that, that goes with you forever.
Andrea asked, is it better to grow your own or to go into the wild? I think we've kind of answered that. I know she's an avid, she loves growing her herbs and plants and everything else. Yeah, as we were saying, yeah.
I don't think one is better than the other. I think that both are necessary.
Yeah.
You need to meet plants and their lives in their own space and on their own terms. But harmonic cultivation is important also. And those could be done one after the other, or those can be done simultaneously. If you really are interested in the spirit contact portion, in the journeying portion, that sort of things, wild is the doorway you need for that. But once you've been through that doorway, domesticated can be a wonderful ally. It's like the difference between, that encounter with the wild raven versus having a pet dog. They're both encounters with intelligences that teach us in different ways, and we interact in different ways. So plants are the same thing. Domesticated, cultivated plants have different energy than wild plants.
All right, so let's have a quick look at the poison path. So I think generally there are two forms of the poison path. One is actually poisoning and cursing, and the other one is entheogenic. I don't really want to talk about the poisoning path, or the actual poisoning and cursing part. I was actually interested in the entheogens, because talking about the Flying Ointments and the Witch's Sabbat. I think since the 60s, there's been a bit of a problem with this, because the hippies kind of got a bit overboard with the whole, take some drugs and let's get an enlightened thing. Whereas
and tune out.
I think that has caused a big problem, because a lot of people are going out there and they're just taking the drugs and thinking they're going to get enlightened. No respect to the spirit of the plant. I mean, shamans would do whole rituals and actually communicate with the spirit of the plant. And I have seen people actually mention that when they've taken whatever drug it is, whatever herb it is, and just recreationally, and then taken it with a particular intent in mind, and it's been a completely different journey. I think that has caused a bit of a problem with the whole 60s hippie vibe thing.
I don't know it's a problem. I don't know that recreational use of various plants is necessarily problematic, because it keeps it within the consciousness and it keeps humans interacting with it. Because the big disconnect between humans and plants is a question of scale. Plants are on a much bigger scale than we are. We think of ourselves as units, individuals, isolated. Plants aren't like that. And, the time scale is there too. When we think of imbibing plants, blending our cells together, we're often interested, well, how long does it take to...
Oops, hang on, Kai's disappeared. Let's see if we can get it back. Andrea, my garden is a little wild. Wild's good. Don't worry about that, Andrea. I'm just wondering, I just want to check if something froze on my end.
Hello?
I know. There we go. You're back.
I'm back. Okay.
Yeah.
Yay, connections. So, scales. Plants are on a much bigger scale than we are. They are connected to all of the land. And they are connected to all of the other plants, all of the fungi and everything else, and other aliens within the soil. We're not. We see ourselves as much more isolated. Of course, doing the magic, working on the self, you'll lose that filter. But there's also a time scale involved. Like I was talking about, the plants provide me in the spring what I will need in the winter. If I can't listen to them in the spring, then I'm not prepared in the winter. That's a big difference for me. But for them, it's just one cycle. So, a lot of times we're very concerned with that much smaller scale when we're talking about plants and our cellular interactions with them. But connecting with plants intentionally helps remove some of those, what I think of are false filters that just really aren't there once you start getting into the reality of things and behind the curtain, behind the veil, so to speak. So I don't think it's necessarily a disservice to find that large portions of the population are interacting unintentionally with mind-altering substances, as we call them.
Mhm.
You know, let people do what they want to do. The more my species interacts with that species, the easier the threshold is for me to cross intentionally.
Mhm.
So, but entheogen means God's inside of it. It's, you know, and it's a way to connect with that energy. It opens doorways for us and allows us to connect in that way. And it's like, did you just wander through the door and you're not really sure why you're in another room? Or did you go, oh, I'm going over there to get that? So that's where the intention changes. But yes, people absolutely have experiences where they take something recreationally, like tobacco, casual smokers, you know, and they experience the portion of what that plant can offer. And then they do it in ceremony, where they have already prepared themselves, they've changed their vibration, they've moved within to the space to be able to hear what the plant has to say. And they get a much richer experience out of it because they're listening.
Yeah.
And it's still the same plant. It can even still be the same method of consumption and everything else. But if you have yourself properly aligned in the right frequency, so that you can hear what the plant has to say, of course you're going to get a much better experience.
Yeah, Andrea said we're all part of the whole. And I mean, yeah, we are. I think we are part of the whole, but we do kind of try to separate ourselves until we start getting more and more into magic and discovering that we are not separate from everything else. I was going to ask you something, now I've forgotten. That's not very clever. The flying ointments. Now, with the old tales, they usually speak mostly about redcap, the mushroom. I think it's Amanita muscaria. Is that right?
Sorry.
It's usually that one, but they've got a lot of other recipes that I've seen, including henbane, mandragore, etc., etc., etc. Now, all of those would be applied as a salve, but what I'm wondering, what I'd like to ask is, can they be used in other ways, and do they actually need to be used to get to the witch's Sabbat?
So that's a complex question.
I know.
Because the vast majority of witches' ointments are based on the action of scopolamines. Scopolamines are a type of poison to our body. They cause a particular hallucination, we'll just use that word for now, that you sprout feathers and you fly and you go to this place that we now call the witch's Sabbat. It is the doorway that plants with scopolamines open. Just like salvias open a particular doorway, and nicotianas open a particular doorway, and peyote opens a particular doorway. Plants with scopolamines open the doorway that we call the witch's Sabbat. I believe that flying ointments are terribly popular because plants with scopolamines grow within that eco niche. So they're readily available. There's a bunch of different kinds of them. You can find them all over. They're useful. You get down into the equator in India, and there's not a ton of plants with scopolamines. There's a few, but they're not nearly as readily available. Same if you're over in Central America, you know. So part of that is climate. But do you have to have the plant ally to get to the place that they open the doorway to? And across the board, the answer is no. You can get there other ways. If you've never been before, most people would like someone to show them where they're going. It's like when you go to a new place, you ask Google these days, how do I get there? You know, or you ask somebody for directions or something. Even if you go by yourself, even if you navigate the way there, you heard about it, you learned about it, you figured out the way there from some source outside of yourself. And that's the same thing going on with the Witch's Sabbat. So there are other ways to get there. Uniquely enough, I think there are two places that we regularly call the Witch's Sabbat. One is the doorway that scopolamine opens, and one is the doorway that alcohol opens. They both end up at revels. They both end up at parties. They have a similar feeling, but one happens to be above ground and one happens to be below ground. So there are different places, but especially when it comes to reading about other people's experiences, and we're talking about ineffable stuff anyways. English is a shitty ass language for this. We conflate them because they're similar, and they get classed as the Witch's Sabbat.
So they're basically keys. If we had, I'm going to bring up Castaneda again because I'm studying him this year again. So Don once spoke about taking peyote to meet mescalito, and I mean the active ingredient in peyote is, I believe, mescaline.
Yep.
So that would be opening the key to actually meeting mescalito. But afterwards, once you've met him, and he actually likes you and doesn't kick you out of the universe, you can go back and meet him without the peyote, without the key, because you already got the key, you've got the song, you've got the name and everything else. So I'm assuming it would be the same thing with this. It's a key to a different alternate reality.
Not alternate, but reality.
Reality, okay. All right. I don't know if it was just my dream or not. Some years back, I actually had a dream about being at a party, and it was a general party. It was in a house, very, very, very big house. And there was one particular gentleman there who was, I don't know if he was the owner of the house, but he was, I'm going to say, the king. And
the table.
Yeah. But I mean, it was just a general party. Everybody was drinking and having a good time and everything else in this house. And I woke up, and the first thought that came to me was, I was at the Witch's Sabbat. But I questioned myself afterwards because there was no forest, there was nothing like this. It was just a party in a house.
I mean, how we experience those different places we go is going to be processed by what we can relate to. And we fill in the gaps. We fill in the gaps with what is comfortable and known. And that's a perfect example. You can go to the Witch's Sabbat through your dreams. You can go to the Witch's Sabbat through other forms of trance, ecstasy, through the moment of orgasm, through dancing to the point of exhaustion and pushing the body into another state, through blood control, whether that's stimulation, overstimulation of the nerves at the surface of the body, or deprivation of blood to certain parts of the brain. That's what the witch's cradle is. There's lots of ways there. And, Gardner gave us the 8 paths to power. Those all get you to the Witch's Sabbat. 8 different roads. Only one of them is plants. So plants are probably one of the easiest ways to get there because they are consistent and they don't take a lot of skill. They take enough skill to not kill yourself because, most things are, the cure is in the dose. And scopolamine is an excellent example. The primary use for them as topical ointments through mucous membranes is because it's a safety mechanism. If you just ate them, you'd probably overdose and die.
Mm.
But because we use our mucous membranes and transdermal applications, we can help control the dose and have an experience without threatening our lives nearly as often. You can still kill yourself with the witch's ointment, made incorrectly, applied incorrectly, so on and so forth. I mean, playing around with such things is not safe. And it's not something to start with, and it's not something to do without guidance and lots of research. But I mean, that's why it's the poison path.
Yeah.
We don't call it the happy, fairy, easygoing rainbow path.
You forgot the unicorns.
Yeah. So, it's still dangerous, but you can eat food that will poison you too. So these doors, these maps, these journeys to other parts of reality that are not part of our waking consciousness, none of them are wholly safe.
Now, speaking about scopolamine, that's also in Datura, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I've actually got a bit of an old connection with Datura, which I never really understood. She kind of chased me across a park one day, which was quite strange. I was kind of messing about with the plant, and all of a sudden I felt some presence there, and it chased me for miles across the park. Yeah, that was quite interesting. Hang on. Sorry. Sorry, who?
I'm going, hey you!
I'm trying to talk to you. Stop running away.
Right?
Yeah, but what I read about the Red Lady back then, I was a bit terrified actually. Andrea says it's usually spontaneous for me. I usually get called away. Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry, the witch's Sabbat. Yeah. I think you can do. I think, as Kai was saying, it's kind of the key for somebody who needs a key. But if you get invited to a house, then you don't need a key to get in. You are invited. So there are all different ways to actually get there. It's just one of the ways.
And that language, called to the Sabbath, called away, that is so common because it happens to many, many people. And some people go and they never go back. And some people go and feel like they don't have a choice. If you read the accounts of the Benandanti, many of them don't necessarily want to be Benandanti, but they don't have a choice. They are called to go and participate in these rites. It's their birthright, but also responsibility. So plants can absolutely open doors and take you to places that you otherwise wouldn't go, but they're not the only key. There are other ways to get there, and we don't always go purposefully. We don't always go by choice, but we can also sometimes choose not to go. There's not cut and dry, black and white answers here. Reality's a mess and mushy.
Yeah. What about the spirit? Probably now completely off topic. What about the spirit of cannabis? Seeing that cannabis has become one of the most popular herbs of the time, especially in South Africa because it only got legalized last year. I found cannabis to be kind of an enhancer, actually, of whatever else you're taking. If I do smoke cannabis and then I have cigarette, for instance, I mean, I don't need to smoke a lot. I'm one of the strange people. I can start hallucinating on one drag of cannabis. But if I have cigarettes afterwards, it kind of increases it. It just makes it stronger. If I've been drinking at the same time, I get more drunk. So it's almost like an enhancer of what you've been doing, actually.
Well, it works like that for some people. It affects others in other ways. We have several receptors that can take in the cannabinoids in various ways. And so how that connects with your own system, endocrine system, is going to be different from person to person. But, one of the things, humans have obviously co-evolved with cannabinoids over the years. We have endocannabinoid receptors that are specifically for the stuff that these plants provide. So how a plant is consumed also makes a difference. Most people associate cannabis with smoking, and smoking is fast. It's very fast. It's the short of injection, it's the fastest way to get something into the bloodstream because it's going right through all those mucous membranes right there, right into the bloodstream. Jumps very, very quickly. And it gets into the bloodstream quickly. It is processed and out of the bloodstream quickly also. And we know that ancient peoples had to have interacted with cannabis in magical ways. We find burials of what are obviously magical technicians for their community, and they have pouches that contain things like cannabis pollen and cannabis seeds. We're assuming there's probably other parts of the cannabis plant, but of course, time degrades those and they break down. We can still find the pollen and the seeds, but they're important enough that these people are being buried with them. So, whether they're using it as an enhancer, whether they're using it as a doorway into a specific realm, I think a lot of that depends on the pharmacology of the plant they're using, the soil that it comes from, because we know that plants, including cannabis, change quite drastically what they're producing depending upon the soil and the conditions they're growing in. But it also depends upon the physiology of that particular person. You might have one person that when they interact with cannabis, they go to sleep. And therefore their doorways are there in dreams. And you might have another person that it enhances things and is simply, instead of a bicycle, it's a car. So you don't have to pedal as hard to get where you're going. So, it's widely varied, I think, partially because as humans, we have co-evolved with many of the cannabis species over thousands of years. And we've obviously interacted with other entheogens, Amanita muscaria, peyote, all of those various plants that are close to many of the cultures that have plant interactions. But cannabis seems to be longer than anyone else, perhaps because where we started as humans, that's where cannabis grows.
Sorry, I was just answering Andrea. Now I've lost my screen. Where's my screen gone? There we go. Yeah, so I was actually going to say, what was I going to say? I keep forgetting what I was going to say. It's terrible.
Oops.
We were talking about the other day about me having this difficulty with, or my insensitivity. I'm a very insensitive person. So working with the energy, I do have difficulty feeling the energy and things like that. I was actually just thinking now, maybe if I actually employ cannabis to help enhance that, so that I can then feel it, see it, everything else, and then I know which direction I'm actually going in. I'm guessing that would help.
If it works for you as an enhancer, I would think so. There's nothing wrong with taking the plants and intentionally going, hey, can you help me do XYZ? Can you help me have a better experience with the energy so that I can learn to feel it? And then wait and see what they say. They might go, yeah, cool, let's hit it. Or they might be like, I'm really not good at that.
Mm.
You know, for a lot of people, I often tell them to start by going and sitting in their yard, but also with a point. You know, if you're going to go sit in your yard and ask the plants, you start with a question. Hey, I want to wake up easier. I want to have better dreams. I want to learn about magic. I want to go to another place so I can learn things. Whatever your intention is, whatever your question is, start there and say, is anybody willing to help me?
Mm.
Does anybody want to go on this journey with me? You know, and you'd be surprised how quickly you will ask that, and then all of a sudden, some plant you've never noticed before will seem to wave at you, or will catch your eye and look really bright green, or, you know, something, you'll smell something all of a sudden. You know, that's the answer.
Mm.
That is the response. That is the beginning of your communication with the plant spirits. And, you know, just because we have these very popular entheogens that everybody knows about, LSD and cannabis and peyote and mescaline and Amanita muscaria, it doesn't mean there aren't other plants out there that are not allies. I mean, the entire mint family is hallucinogenic. It just depends on dose.
Mm.
You know, all of the ginger family has a particular action on smooth muscle and mucous membranes and can induce trance states. Just depends on dose and preparation. And it depends on your physiology. I mean, we know from modern medicine that not everybody can take the exact same preparation and have the exact same effects. So the same is true in the magical world. What works for you might not work for me. I might get a different effect from it. But if you talk to them, they can usually help you sort that out. Plants are really, really talkative in my experience. They want to communicate with us. They want to work with us. They're not a closed, standoffish doorway like some of the other energies in the world.
Yeah. Andrea's just commenting on her husband's irritability. Lactuca virosa is great for that. I've never heard of Lactuca virosa. What's that?
Lactuca virosa is wild lettuce, commonly called. It's part of the lettuce family. It's the lactucarium is the latex-laden sap, the white sap that is leached from the plant. But a lot of people also use Lactuca virosa just as a tea because it's a very low minor dose. The dried leaves. It is important when preparing Lactuca virosa to remove the spines that are along the bottom of the leaf because lots of people are allergic to lettuce and the Asteraceae family, and those spines have high amounts of that. And of course, if you have a latex allergy, you have to be careful because it is a lot of latex in those instances. I have a latex allergy. But I've worked with dandelion and wild lettuce for many years. I'm just cautious about, you know, not getting a whole bunch on my skin and making sure it's not too much at one time and removing the spines and that sort of thing.
Cool. Never heard of that before. Learn something every day. It's brilliant.
There's a lot of wild lettuce all over the world, various varieties. So I'm sure there's one somewhere there in South Africa.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. All right. I think we've been on for about an hour. So I think we're going to end the stream now. I just want to thank Kai for being here. Absolutely wonderful person. Love you to bits. And well, I'm going to end the stream on Thingy, so I'll talk to you in a second just now. So everybody who's been watching, Andrea, thank you. And I will see you guys next week. Dandelions are fantastic. Nice hearing. Christopher's here as well. And he didn't even say hello. That's very rude, Christopher. Bloody hell. Gonna get it on Sunday. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good one. Cheers. Okay, let me just end this. And What's it doing?